Hello, for today we are going to be looking at how to find the vertex, the axis of symmetry, the focus, and the directrix of a parabola. So I wanted to start, and you can pause the video to write these down and draw yourself a little graph if you want to. I wanted to start with just an easy one that's already got everything simplified. Okay, so we know that this is x squared, so it's going to be a parabola that opens either up or down. Okay, so our vertex is going to be the opposite of what's in parentheses, so 1. And since this number is outside parentheses, it's just -2. So I'm going to go over here and go to 1, -2, and write my vertex there. Okay, now when I look at this, since I know that it's got to be up or down, the coefficient that's in front of my x squared term determines if it goes up or down. If it's positive, it's going to be up. So I'm just going to do a rough sketch. I'm not going to worry about the points on the side. I'm just going to draw that because the main thing we're learning now, we already know how to graph vertex or parabolas, I hope, and because we learned that in the last couple of units. So now we're just learning how to do the focus and the directrix. So the easy thing, once we find the vertex, is we have our axis of symmetry, which is an imaginary line that splits the parabola in half. It's always going to be one of the points of your vertex. And when you go down the middle of your graph, then you can see that it hits on x equals 1. So the axis of symmetry is going to be always an equation. So it's going to be x equals 1 in this case. It'll either be x equals a number or y equals a number. So those two parts I don't think are a problem. Now, the other thing you have to do, and I didn't include it up here, but you have to find the p-value, which is the distance, excuse me, from the vertex to the focus, which is always inside the parabola, and from the vertex to the directrix, which is always outside the parabola. It directs the way the parabola is turned. So that if your coefficient is in front of your squared term, in other words, you don't have a coefficient for y over here, then you have this assumed 1 right here. So you use the formula 1 over 4a, and that is 1 over 4 times 1, which equals 1/4. What that means is the focus is 1/4 away on the inside on the axis of symmetry. We're going to move up 1/4, and the directrix is going to be 1/4 on the other side of the vertex. So then your directrix goes a straight line, and the parabola always turns away from the directrix. So it's like determining the direction of the parabola. So this is 1/4 from here to here, and from here to here is 1/4. That's what this distance is. Now, it's not as easy to see when you have a fraction. So you can go back, and if we notice the value that changed, the x did not change at all. The y value did. So when we go over here to find the focus, we take our vertex. The x did not change, so we keep the x value from the vertex. And we take our y value, and we put it down. In the focus, you always add your p-value. Okay, so -2 plus 1/4 is going to give you 1 and -1 3/4. And most of the time, this is seen as an improper fraction rather than a mixed number. So right here, if you notice, we had it at 1 as our positive and -1 3/4, and it's kind of all squeezed together here, but we're going to assume it was a -1 3/4. To change that back to an improper fraction so it matches what you might see in the back of a textbook or whatever, you do 4 times 1 plus 3. You just go in that order. So the 4 stays. Your denominator always stays the same thing. It's going to stay negative. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So this is -7/4. So your focus is going to be 1, negative 7/4. And that would be the point that this is graphed at. Now, the directrix is always an equation, okay? So this hits at y, so it's going to be y equals something. Okay, so we're going to take the y value of our vertex. We're going to say negative 2. And since the focus was plus the p-value distance, the directrix is minus the p-value distance. So negative 2 minus 1/4 would equal negative 2 and 1/4. And as a mixed number, or as an improper fraction, from a mixed number, you keep the 4 and you do 4 times 2 plus 1 is going to be 9, and it was negative to start with. So negative 9/4. So there's your directrix. It's an equation. Your focus is a coordinate. Your axis of symmetry is an equation. And your vertex is a coordinate. Okay, and that one's pretty easy, I hope. I know that's a lot of work, but that's Algebra 2. It has a lot of work sometimes. All right, so number 3 is more typical of what's on your assignment tonight. So let's look at, or number 2, is how to set this up. Okay, my y squared is over here, and it's positive, so I like that. So I'm going to take this negative 36y and move it over here to be with the other y. So when I move it across the equal sign, I'm adding 36y, or I'm adding 36y on both sides to get this to 0. Okay, so that's going to be 3y squared plus 36y equals, and now I'm just going to arrange this so that the x is in the front. Didn't cross the equal sign, so no signs changed. I just moved them around. So if this number in front of your square term, if this coefficient is not a positive 1, then you have to factor it out. So I'm going to take a 3 out. So 3y squared divided by 3 is y squared. And 36y divided by 3 is 12y. And we have to complete the square on this one. So plus something equals negative x minus 109 plus, since this was multiplied by 3 ultimately, over here it's got to be 3 times that value. Because if we checked it, we would do 3 times this, 3 times this, do the distributive property. So we have to do it on this side too. So to find this, we're going to do 12 divided by 2. We always take that b value. And that is 6 squared. Well, that 6 is what goes down here with my y to get my perfect square. Okay? And it equals 36. That's what goes up here. Okay. So we've got our y's taken care of. Now on this side, we've got negative x minus 109, and 3 times 36 is 108. So 3y plus 6 squared equals negative x minus 1. Now, we don't ever want this to be negative, so we've got to factor out a negative 1 on this side also. So we've got 3y plus 6 squared equals negative 1 x plus 1. Because if I do negative 1x divided by negative 1, it's x, and negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. So since these are in parentheses, I don't have to move anything over now. I can just take my vertex from that because it's already isolated here. So my vertex is going to be negative 1 for my x value and negative 6 for my y value. So that vertex, you can go ahead and graph that over here. So negative 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Negative 1, negative 6. And looking at this, my y is what's squared. So that lets me know it's opening left or right. And this positive coefficient that's in front of my square term lets me know that it opens right. So I'm just going to draw a rough sketch of what it's going to look like. So there's my vertex. My axis of symmetry is just going to be y equals -6. So once you find the vertex, axis of symmetry is really easy. And then my focus and my directrix is going to be on this axis of symmetry line, and they're going to be the same distance from the vertex. So we have to find that distance. So right here, P equals 1 over 4A, and A is the coefficient of your squared term. So this becomes 1 over 4 times 3, which equals 1/12. So that means, and it's really hard to graph something that small, but it means basically I'm going to have the focus really, really close to my vertex. And my directrix would be just 1/12 away from my vertex the other way. So here's my directrix. This is my focus. But since it's a fraction, we can't really tell what number it's at without doing some work here. On this one, my x value changed. So I go back to my vertex, and I take from my focus, whereas before we did the y value, the y changed. This time the x's changes, and you can just tell that by looking at your graph and where those points move. So I'm going to take my -1. Focus is always add this amount. And my y value stays the same. So -1 plus 1/12 would give me -11/12.
Scotty Giles, your van is out front.
Sorry about that. Okay. So my focus is going to be -11/12, -6, because we add that. Okay, so that's that point. Now for my directrix, it's going to be also my x value, and where we add on the focus, we subtract on the directrix, that p value. And we don't have to have the y because the directrix is, oh, sorry about that. The directrix is an equation. So -1 minus 1/12 is -1.
Parker Hart, please
and
go
1/12.
to the lab.
So 12 times -1 plus 1. So that's 12 plus 1 is 13/12. And it was negative, so our directrix, you notice it hits right here on the x-axis, is x equals 13/12. Okay, I know that seems like a lot. I guess it is a lot, but you just have to work through it to find them all. You know the steps. We've done completing the squares, all of that. So I'm hoping that this video helps and you'll be able to take it from there. Thank you.